Well, hello there. And it's literary as Feck, isn't it, Nick?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, Clive.
And that's who we are, Nick and Clive. And this is
That's us.
literary as Feck. And we're going to be talking about a book because that's what we do on this show. You just can't
Yes.
keep us quiet about books. And the book under review this time is my choice is this. Exploits and Adventures of Brigadier Gerard by
hmm
Arthur Conan Doyle. This is the New York Review of Books reissue of, I think, all the Etienne Gerard stories,
hmm
right?
I
Uh,
believe so. There is a novel that he appears in, but I don't know if that's. I actually did get that version because I couldn't get a Kindle copy of it for whatever reason. So I got
okay,
an, I got on. So the only thing I'm missing, I think, is the foreword by Flashman
George
fellow.
MacDonald Fraser, which is, very apt.
Well, yeah.
Clearly,
Um,
clearly the inspiration for Flashman. Um, yeah, you're not missing a huge amount from the it's
right.
just him talking about how much he really likes these stories, right? That's about it, really.
Right. But so in this version, they were all roughly kind of equal length stories, right? There wasn't one that suddenly was like a novella or a novel length in the one that you
No,
read. So
no.
then, yeah. So apparently there is a novel as well but he's not. I don't think he's the main character. I think he's a supporting character in some
Yes,
novel.
that's right. I'm not sure if that's his origins. I'm not sure if like he appeared as a supporting character and then South Conan decided to spin him off, or I can't remember. It probably said in the intro, but that was a while ago. I read that now.
Right. Well, I mean, that is what I don't know either, but that is what he did with Sherlock Holmes, right? Because Sherlock Holmes starts in the two novels. And then after the success of the novels, he spun him off and did a series of short stories.
I suppose so, although those two novels are, I mean, they are pretty much Sherlock Holmes novels, right? They're not someone else's
Oh no, no, yeah,
story.
yeah,
Like,
for sure. Although the first one is weird because it's half Sherlock Holmes, and then it has this really extended flashback
oh, that's
explaining
true. It's
how we got here. But you're right. No, they are very much Sherlock Holmes stories. But then, I mean, I just meant he did a novel length treatment first, and then went to short stories, which
yeah.
really are maybe his forte, I think.
Yeah, I mean, George MacDonald Fraser mentions that in his intro as well, that kind of how what a master of the short story form
Mhm.
he was. And yeah, he does seem to be, well, yeah, in general, that's what people think of him rather than, although for instance, the Sherlock Holmes novels are fine
Mhm.
as well, but it is the short stories you do. Although I do quite like that first novel that yeah, kind of has a extremely long flashback and stuff to do with Mormons.
Mormons in Utah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I do like it because it's a good book, but it's also it's yeah, it's a bit of a slight outlier, isn't it?
Yeah, because half of it's set in England in kind of foggy, damp London, and that's our stereotypical image of where Sherlock Holmes. And then we suddenly cut to like the Wild West for a full half the book.
What's that one called? Is it the Valley of Fear?
Or is that the Sign of Four, maybe?
Yeah, it's one or the other.
Or maybe it has both titles. Could be one of those ones that was.
No, it's either the Valley of Fear or the Anyway, it doesn't really matter because we're not here to talk about that. We're here to
No,
talk
no.
about
But we are in a way because
Gerard.
this is right. I mean, from my reading about this, if you know anything about Sherlock Holmes, you know that Conan Doyle got the hump with writing the stories relatively early on, right? He'd
Right.
kind of written what amounts to the first two collections of stories published in what was the Strand or whatever magazine they were
Yeah,
published in,
yeah.
right? And then was so sick of
Which of
Holmes, they,
course Roxy Music would later sing about.
of course,
They were
yes,
huge Sherlock Holmes fans and they just couldn't contain themselves and they had to sing their song
Hmm.
about the Strand.
Do the Strand, yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we have the story of Holmes going off the Reichenbach Falls with Moriarty, and then that's the end of Holmes for like a decade or something, right? At which point, this is kind of his like about face, right? This is his kind of like I need to get as far away from that cerebral kind of character and do something that's much more of a lark, I guess.
Yeah. It's interesting. Judge Donald Fraser as well tries to make the case for these Gerard's stories kind of almost being the best of Conan Doyle for him. And obviously they spoke to him because there's so much Flashman in them.
Right.
But yeah, so we should probably so we should set the scene. So yeah, Gerard is basically he's a soldier, he's a hussar, right? If that's how you pronounce it. Kind
Yes.
of horse cavalry, I guess,
Mhm.
in Napoleon's army during the Napoleonic Wars, right?
Mhm.
And
He wears red pants, which is really important. Because I, for some
yes,
reason, the other day I looked up the uniforms of the various, and he's a member of the 7th Hussars, and they wore these bright red pants. But if you see, like each of the different, I guess, columns or whatever, they all had their own uniforms. Clearly, Napoleon was very fashion forward.
Yep, yep. It's one of the things he was known for.
Hmm.
And there
Yeah.
is, I think that's him, isn't it? In
Yep.
so this is a famous painting. I didn't. It's Napoleon on the battlefield at Eylau by Antoine Jean Gros, and it's actually from 1808 as well. So it's quite
Yeah.
of
Relatively early.
the time. Yeah, yeah. But it's a kind of
I
interesting
always,
looking painting. I quite like it.
who do you think? I mean, like the most famous painting of Napoleon is that one by oh shit, what the hell's his name? Jacques Louis David, of him like on the white horse.
Oh, that's the one that like
Up.
Steve Bannon has in his fucking office, right?
Yes,
Probably
yes.
with his face
Yes.
photoshopped.
But I always think, like, if you think of Napoleon, like, what actor do you think, like, whose face comes to mind?
Well,
when
clearly it's Eli Wallach.
Yes, well, yeah. Now that is always going to be the
Well,
case.
actually, the one I think of, and that's just
Yeah.
because I saw that rather underrated film Waterloo not that long ago. I actually imagine Rod Steiger kind of looks
Okay.
very Napoleon.
Okay, it's funny because there's two that come to mind, and one is actually an actor who played him in a movie, but the other is not an actor who, well, it's not somebody who's ever played him, I don't think. But Phil Collins. Whenever I think of Napoleon, I think of that skeevy little fuck, Phil Collins. They occupy the same place in my brain of like great, like spectacular failures of history.
Yeah, I try not to think of Phil Collins as often as possible, really.
Fair enough. And then probably the guy who played him in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure would be the second person that comes
Okay,
to mind.
I don't remember that. Yeah, no, he didn't. Phil Collins never did get the chance to play. No, maybe it was a toss up. I'm either going to play Napoleon or Buster, and he went for
Right, right.
he went for
Actually,
Buster.
Bob Hoskins probably should have played him.
He might have done. You never know if we have a look through the. Yeah, Bob Hoskins would have been that's actually quite a good call. I can imagine that. At the very end, he's about to win a battle, but turns out the IRA have taken over, and he's just angry on the back of a horse.
Anyway, back to Gerard.
Yeah, so basically it's as the so I guess this is a collection of collections as well, right? The short stories would have been collected in volumes, and then I think there's like three collections in this one. This is the pretty much everything Gerard you need other than that novel maybe. And yeah, across the you get the sense that he's getting older and older and older and relaying tales of daring do. The older he gets and slightly more melancholy, I guess. And so to give you a taste, because the thing is he's I suppose he's a likable braggart, isn't he, basically? He has an incredibly inflated sense of his own self-worth. And you should dislike him intensely, but somehow you quite like him, and he always ends up accidentally landing on his feet, right? Like he kind of almost always fucks up and doesn't actually understand what's happening. But I'll read you this because this gives you a sense of his voice, right? This is the very beginning of Brigadier Gerard at Waterloo. Of all the great battles in which I had the honor of drawing my sword for the Emperor and for France, there was not one which was lost. At Waterloo, although in a sense I was present, I was unable to fight, and the enemy was victorious. It is not for me to say that there is a connection between these two things. You know me too well, my friends, to imagine that I would make such a claim. But it gives matter for thought, and some have drawn flattering conclusions from it. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
very much Gerard in a nutshell.
Mhm. Yes, yeah. Certainly, likes to swive the ladies, and certainly, yeah, believes that he is irresistible to
Oh yeah,
all.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah. And he has the most magnificent beard in the entire empire, right?
Yes, yeah. Um, yeah, it's funny. The stories, I really enjoy these actually. And I don't know that I would go so far as to say that they're as compulsively readable
No,
as the Sherlock Holmes stories,
no.
but I think spaced out, which I mostly did as well. I didn't kind of mill the book in 1 or 2 days. I took them as individual stories and read them that way.
Yeah,
And
very
I had
wise,
tons
I
of
think.
fun. I had tons of fun with this, and I was surprised by a few things. I was surprised by how, like, it should be a lot more mean spirited. This is a book written by an Englishman about a kind of a braggart, Frenchman, right?
Mm.
You like, somehow the portrait is more sympathetic and more yeah, I don't know. Like, there's an element of gallantry, there's an element of decency to Gerard that I was kind of taken aback by,
Mm.
if that makes any sense. I just assumed it would be kind of like it would be coming from a slightly more cutting, mean kind of a place.
Yeah, well, it rides that line, doesn't it? And I think that passage I read, for example, gives a good example of it. He's foolish, but and he is a bit of a buffoon, but he is kind of quite honorable as well,
Mhm.
and is. I mean, you couldn't have a more loyal subject, right?
Right. And like and brave to a fault, like to a level
Yeah,
of stupidity,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um,
No,
and
I enjoyed it. I suppose the only thing was maybe the intro set me up a bit too much. Like they are yeah, from the get-go that all I don't think any of the stories were differs. Some are better than
yeah,
others, but
and action
yeah, yeah,
packed to
yeah,
a degree that even maybe you get something else from the Sherlock Holmes stories, but from these you can't fault them for the amount of like swashbuckling daring do.
right. Yeah, so there's a consistent level of quality. I suppose the one thing, not disappointed, because like you as I did enjoy it all the way through, and yes, reading it portioned out is a good idea. But I don't know. I suppose I I was expecting every now and again. I thought there might be one like really exceptional story that ramped it up that you could take out and put in like
Mhm.
a collection of the greatest short stories or something. But I don't think there was any one that really just
I
so they're
might make
all
a case for one.
consistently
Yeah.
quite entertaining
Hmm.
and fun, but it never nothing really jumped out at me as like now that was a tale by God.
Right. But I wonder if but maybe it only works if you read it as part of the whole. But if the two stories that are basically parts one and two of the fall of Napoleon and the Battle of Waterloo,
Hmm.
something happens quite early on in that first story that is really effective. It, like, up until then, it's all kind of been fun and games. There's been an element of kind of like, yes, sometimes people do get murdered, and sometimes there's some grisly stuff in some of the earlier stories.
Yeah, like the Spanish burying people alive, for example. That was
Yeah,
pretty
you
grim.
know, but it still kind of feels there's still an element of kind of like knockabout jocularity about that stuff. But there's a passage that suddenly comes up where, like, on the battlefield, where it's like relentlessly grim. People are having their
Hmm.
legs and arms sawn off. There's people lying down who are like, there's a guy who's fallen down, like an old man or an older soldier's fallen down. His leg is at like a weird angle, and people are just tramping over it, trying to like and he's kind of screaming in pain. It was just this moment in the story that I thought, wow, this is where, for whatever reason, Conan Doyle has decided to give us like a fairly warts and all portrayal of war, whereas up until that point in the stories, it's all been kind of fun and games.
Right, right.
But it only works if you've read all of that stuff, and then because for me, I was quite like, I was blindsided a little bit by like, oh, we're suddenly taking this seriously now, to a degree that it wasn't the case before.
Yeah, but again, and again, I think that's quite. I don't know. He's got a really good handle on the time and place, and I also like. I again, not really understanding these, not knowing anything, not being a historian in any way, shape, or form. I get the feeling that the Gerard character and his kind of unceasing loyalty is not just something that's been written into the character so we can have a bit of fun at his expense. I get the feeling that Gerard is kind of indicative of someone in Napoleon's army. Do you know what I mean? Like, so something feels quite authentic about that level of loyalty. I don't know why, and again, I could be talking out of my ass, but just instinctively, it feels kind of authentic and somehow historically correct.
Yeah, I would agree. Like there's very few, if any, bum notes that I felt about his characterization. Is very consistent, and yeah, it's easy to believe that there would have been people.
Yeah,
there's people in the army who are kind of like who glory worship the leader, right?
Yeah, because like what's interesting about Flashman is, clearly this was the jumping off point. But the thing with Flashman is, you know,
completely
he's
self-serving asshole.
Yeah, and kind of an outlier as well, and a way at look kind of. I don't know. We talked about this when we talked about Flashman, but and if you listen to John MacDonald Fraser's Desert Island Discs, it's really fascinating as well. Just his kind of. I mean, you read the books, and in some ways, they're a very savage indictment of things that were done in the name of colonialism. But at the same time, like, he loves it as well, right? Like, he really thinks these were the glory days, while at the same time fully kind of, you know, it's a warts and all, but somehow he still thinks, you know, that. So this is very different, right? Because seems to be a much more well, I don't know. In a way, I suppose you could argue it's a more romanticized look at that period of history because Gerard is basically a good guy and not a cad like Flashman.
Yes.
But Seth Conan, I don't know. Again, I haven't read. Maybe I have only read all the Sherlock Holmes and the Professor Challenger stories, and I don't think. I get the feeling that he's a very reserved writer. Like, he never really, you know, he never really lets it rip. He always kind of keeps things in check. Do you know what I mean? Like, I never feel he never lets it go off the rails.
Right. Although when he gets close, then it gets really exciting. There's a couple of, like, in fact, that story, the one that introduces Moriarty, like the last of the original cycle, does suddenly amp up the action to a tremendous degree at the very beginning of the story. You're like, holy shit! Suddenly, Holmes is like running and like jumping over back walls of people's gardens, and like, you're like, this is a different, yeah. And so in this too, as I said, quite near the end, I felt like it sort of got a bit closer to that level of energy, or whatever you want to say.
Right. Yeah. So who would you recommend this book to? I mean, for example, just to give you an example of, like, so, I don't think I would recommend this to my missus, for example, not because I don't think she'd like it. I think she would get on with it fine, but I don't know. I don't think it's outstanding enough that she needs it in her life, or anyone just using her as an example, I suppose, of anyone who is non-specifically interested in Conan Doyle or this
Right.
era of fiction or this era in history or something, I would hesitate to recommend, not because it isn't good, but just I don't know. I don't feel a pressing urge to
Right, to go door to door,
yeah, like
proselytize.
you must read
The
the Adventures
Bible
Gerard.
of Etienne Gerard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, perhaps one of the saddest things for Gerard, I suppose, given how what an inflated self he has, is that you know that in the Guinness Book of World Records, at least at the moment, until Batman fucking takes over at some point, but the most adapted to screen literary character of all time,
Sherlock Holmes,
is of course Sherlock Holmes, with over 250 cinematic or adaptations. There are 3 for Gerard. 2 of them are silent, and 1 of them is sound. And if we have a minute, we might talk about that. If you had a chance to watch any of them.
Yeah, no, I wasn't aware there was a 3rd one though.
There was one that predates the one with Rod LaRock.
It's not extant.
By a decade. No, it seems to be lost.
Yeah. Right.
And so yeah, that's 3 is not 250. So it does kind of say that generally
once again, your mathematics are impeccable.
Well, yes, you know, that greater than less than equals to part of math was.
I did notice that you looked down. You had it written on a piece of paper.
I did, yes, just to make sure that I wasn't wrong. But yeah, so you know, in terms of capturing the public's attention, in terms of like capturing the zeitgeist, I don't know that. I mean, I suppose too, there's a reason why Sherlock Holmes was back in a decade, right? Because Arthur Conan Doyle never really captured lightning in a bottle the same way, you know, and so obviously felt the need to go back and bring him back to life.
Yes. It's Stallone going back and resurrecting Rocky or Rambo when Oscar or Stop or My Mom Will Shoot.
Will shoot, yeah,
Stop,
haven't quite. Yes.
Yes.
Go back to the safe bet.
I do apologize to all Conan Doyle fans for that analogy.
But that said, yeah, I mean, for me anyway, maybe you and I are more the target audience for this than the average person, and that we have a bit more.
Yes. I also had a sense while reading it. I think Nick's enjoying this.
Yeah,
like I'm enjoying it, but I reckon Nick's enjoying this just a smidge
more. Yeah, it might be true. I did enjoy, like, I know it was definitely written the way that he would tell you something, but you know, he's the classically unreliable narrator, not because he's lying to you, but because he doesn't have a very good command. He has not got a great read of the room most of the time. Right. Because everything is through this myopic lens of like, I'm fucking awesome, and everyone knows how awesome I am. And therefore, when people are literally pushing him out of rooms and stuff to get rid of him, it's always done in love or like, you know.
Yes.
Yeah. So I enjoyed. There was numerous times where it did raise a smirk. And then all of the British French stuff as well. I mean,
yes,
obviously they make great hay out of the fox hunt, and the boxing match I really enjoyed, where he bites the other person, like, and doesn't understand why that's not okay.
As played by Rod LaRock, who I know from being in a few Shadow films as well. You know, the Shadow Knows. He was in a couple of Shadow films in the 40s. And so in 1927, The Fighting Eagle, directed by Donald Crisp, and it's a Cecil B. DeMille production, right?
It doesn't look cheap, that's for sure. It looks in some ways, I think it looks better than the 1970 version, even just in terms of the look of the costuming, the look of the whole thing. It just looks better.
No musical accompaniment on the version on YouTube, though, which is a problem. You kind of need to supply your own, right? But no, it's obviously it's distanced. It's a silent film. It's distanced from us in terms of like pacing and things like that. So it seems a little static at times. And
Yeah,
you
I
have,
might if I was watching this again, I would recommend that people use the speed
yes,
on
I
YouTube.
experimented
Speed
with
it
that
up.
actually, and it actually
I did
works
too.
really
I
well. It's
thought it was a lot better once I sped it up by about 25%,
because you're
because
not
the even
losing
was more
any
natural.
sound, right?
Nope. And the time it takes me to read things is evidently much shorter than the average person in 1927.
Yeah, that's true, because
I
it's
don't
on there
need
for a
I
while.
don't need 3 lines on there for 5 minutes. Yeah.
No, it's fine because it's only 67 minutes. You speed that sucker up, it's like watching a TV episode or something, right? So
Yeah.
it's easily digestible. And yeah, no, it's a
I
pretty
think
good
Rod is
prompt.
great.
Yeah, he's
In
good. I
he's
like.
got beautifully immaculate sideburns. He kind of, for some reason, he reminded me a little bit of Chris Evans in like Captain America. That kind of like sort of stupid, good-natured, nice
Right.
guy kind of. Yeah.
His rod is totally La Rock all the way through.
Oh my God, he's wearing tights that take you to a level of smuggling plums you've never even seen before.
Right. No, yeah, it's if you factor it's in like again, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone,
Mhm.
a regular citizen.
No.
If you can, but if if you're interested in silent era cinema, it's actually, you can see that this must have been quite the exciting
Yeah.
swashbuckler back in the day.
Yeah. In fact, some of the action scenes are really quite like balls to the wall, frenetically, just like pummeling in a way that the choreography seemed more mad and more just, yeah, like out of control than it does again in the 1970 version, which is much more staid, I think.
Yeah, so in 1970, we have The Adventures of Gerard,
Mhm.
directed by Jerzy Skolimowski as well, right? Which I was kind of surprised by, the Polish director of Deep End and that strange film, The Shout. Have you ever seen that? The
I don't think so.
with Alan Bates about the um someone. It's like it's kind of a British horror film about someone who learns how to kill by shouting.
Okay.
It's quite interesting. I think you would find it.
Sounds good.
Like it. And he also made that film. Do you remember that film, Essential Killing, in which what's his face, brown bunny guy, what's his name? Vincent
Yeah. Gallo?
Gallo. Yeah.
Yeah.
He plays like a mujahideen or something who ends up like getting captured and then escapes and has to survive. And there's like almost no dialogue in the film. And there's a scene where Vincent Gallo, starving Vincent Gallo, attacks a lactating woman with big breasts because like he needs
Mhm.
milk to survive.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
also quite an interesting film.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, but and Adventures of Gerard with Peter McInerney.
Yes. Who I
Oh,
remember from childhood
okay.
from The Fighting Prince of Donegal. He had a brief contract with Disney where he did a couple of Disney films, including this weird pro like Irish rebellion film that I saw on TV as a kid in Ireland and enjoyed quite a bit more. That I think it's one of those things where I tried to come back to it a few years ago and was like, I don't quite know what I saw in this when I was 8 or 9 years old. It wasn't that great, but
I wasn't overly familiar with him, I have to admit. Although he does, I don't know, he kind of looks a bit like I would imagine Gerard looked like. I was thinking of other people.
he's a bit too skinny for me. I when I was reading the book initially, I was very much seeing Gaston from the Beauty and the Beast cartoon, the Disney one. He's the asshole. Bruce Campbell, maybe. Like
I was thinking John Finch
I don't know if I know.
from Frenzy, Hitchcock's Frenzy.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah. Okay,
He's in Polanski's Macbeth, right?
yes. Somebody just a bit more solidly, stolidly
See,
built.
it's funny. I imagined Gerard as actually Whippet.
Okay,
I,
interesting.
I I think he's. I think you've been gaslit by Gerard because I think that's what he wants you to think of him as.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
In fact, it's probably a bit too on the nose, but surely the young Gerard Depardieu from maybe when he was doing like
I see.
1900.
That's too big. I reckon that's how he sees himself.
Right. Okay.
If you see what I
But
mean.
I'm not talking about Gerard Depardieu now, though.
No, no, no. But
I'm
even back,
talking about him.
Gerard Depardieu's always been. I think the word is strapping, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah, I think oddly enough, I think it fits that he's not.
He's
I
kind of
like the
skinny,
idea.
little runty.
Yeah, yeah, but
Okay. All
he
right.
imagines himself more.
Okay.
So you didn't get on with this at all, did you? This
It was no, I didn't hate it. So I wasn't actively grinding my teeth all the way through it. There's obviously going to be elements, surprise, surprise, that would have appealed to me, right? The Riz Ortolani spaghetti western score, the fact that it's mostly shot in Spain on the same sets that we've seen dozens of times in as doubling for Mexico, right?
right.
We've got Eli Wallach and Claudio Cardinale, both obviously stalwarts of the spaghetti western. So yeah, there was lots that kind of like that made me feel comfortable. The comedy becomes increasingly broad and increasingly stupid as
speeded up scenes. But it's
once Jack Hawkins comes in, it seems like it really kicks into overdrive in the kind of the goofiness, right?
Which is not something you usually think of as Jack. Oh, here comes Jack. Now it's going to get silly.
It's going to get silly, yeah, exactly.
But it's interesting. I think it's maybe because it's coming from because it's just Skolimowski obviously brings this slight kind of slight air of like Polish surrealism to it a little bit. I think that like if this had been made, I think by a British director or someone like
fucking Peter Ustinov had directed this.
Yeah, it would be more straight up, like you said, teeth grindingly, annoyingly silly. But Skolimowski's brings a slight surrealist edge to it. So some bits are actually kind of weirdly there was like I don't know, it felt like something that kept jumping in and out of like railway grooves or something. It was like for a while I was kind of into it and it was silly, but it was a silliness that was hypnotizing me a little bit. And then all of a sudden it would just no, and then it would go back in. And did you have a similar kind of?
Yeah, definitely.
So I found it when you said that, because you mentioned, I much prefer the silent, and yeah, objectively
I still do though.
Yeah, objectively it's a better film as well. But so I was thinking, oh god, this is going to be a chore to watch it, right? And
well, maybe that was good that I set the bar low for you then, because then
it wasn't a complete chore, but yeah, it's an interesting.
It doesn't overtake.
I can imagine watching it again. Oddly enough, I can imagine watching it again.
Well,
one day, like I don't know, with a spliff on the go or something. Like
I will say, I was very impressed that Claudia Cardinale managed to find not one but two Marty Feldmans to have as her sidekicks. I didn't even know you could get them in Spanish or Italian variants.
They're all
that
over.
Was right.
But actually she was surprisingly quite good. In it.
She wasn't bad at all.
You got John Neville turns up as Wellington, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think he doesn't do anything between that and then fucking Baron Munchausen, which is interesting. They are kind of a piece in a way, right? And
of course, Eli Wallach
not doing a French accent in any way, shape, or form. Not even pretending. Not even the tiniest bit.
He was doing something
because he at least
doing something with his accent, but I don't know what it was.
But I think he was just still doing like Tuco from like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Like he was like, that'll do. Like whatever my vague Mexican thing that I did.
I don't know. I quite liked there's something about Eli Wallach in this film. Like, I think he's actually trying, like, because he's got this look on his puzzle. He looks like there's some kind of interior monologue going on. Like he's doing
Right.
something, but I don't know quite what it is.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. I like Eli Wallach an awful lot. And he is, he does look the part. I mean, he's a shorter guy.
He does.
He does the hunched shoulders properly. He's fine. It's just that overall the movie is a bit less than some of its parts.
And there's a strange kind of there's a strange sequence. I can't even remember what. Isn't there a bit where he shoots someone like playing some kind of instrument which explodes?
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out what on earth was going on there.
Nope. Also,
there was a good scene. I liked that scene, but I didn't understand it.
Agreed. There was a brief second where clearly a horse was drinking out of a beer glass. That for some reason jumped right out of me. Oh yeah, and so it was one of the people involved with this was Enzo Barboni.
Right.
EB Culture, whatever the fuck his name is, the Trinity guy, which kind of made sense to me too, because when is the first Trinity film? It's got to be pretty much around this time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's fine.
You did up a scene. I like it. I can use it in my film.
Yeah.
Just by the way, that was, you probably don't know, listeners, but that was spot on. That's exactly how Barboni speaks.
Yes, it is true. Yeah, having had beans with the man many times myself. Yeah, him and Bud Spencer, that's all they do. They sit down eating giant frying pans full of beans.
So yeah, so overall, I mean, it's an odd one. It's a book I would not exactly recommend to everyone, but I would recommend to some people. And also, both the films are kind of I mean, so yeah, the Gerard canon is kind of
an odd,
yeah. Although I've quite enjoyed spending time delving into it.
Agreed. And I think it is, in a strange way, it makes you understand Sherlock Holmes a little bit more by having the realization that there's this other figure that at one point, before he brought Holmes back, would have had roughly the same number of pages devoted, right?
Right.
Kind of, yeah. They make an interesting couple. I'm surely somebody's fan fiction has to have considered the possibility of bringing them together.
Oh, I'm sure someone,
or not, or people who write fan fiction of Sherlock Holmes have no idea that Gerard exists. I mean,
anyway, I do know of any fan fiction that brings two titans together.
Yeah, please keep it to yourself.
Yes, we don't want to hear about it. Until next time, then.
Toodle pip.